Hey everybody, how are you doing? Um, I want to talk today a little bit about um, hidden wounding, right? So, not to be too dramatic, but there's certain behaviors that we kind of that we run. There's certain scripts that we're acting out, and they become quite normal to us. And then maybe through closer examination, or maybe just through witnessing somebody who doesn't have that script, we can begin to realize, hey, this is actually not normal at all. This might actually be dysfunctional behavior. And I want to talk about that today. It's something that I sometimes notice with me, how I don't take holidays, for example. And a part of me always sort of thought that, like, oh no, I'm just not a holiday person. I enjoy my projects, I enjoy my work, but I think it's also just that I think the wounding is that I am not totally deserving of a holiday. And this has kind of been a little bit hidden from me recently. But it's been popping up a little bit more. And so, yeah, I want to kind of just talk about other elements of hidden wounding, and maybe some of this makes sense to you. So, right, yeah. Another kind of example of this that I noticed in me is just ambition. Sometimes I I can be I can be just on to the next thing. I remember working with someone once, and we worked in corporate coaching. We go over to London and we deal with like these big tech companies, and we go in and we do like a couple of coaching days. And I remember we finished, and it was a sort of a Saturday or Friday afternoon in London. And we were, maybe the person that I was working with, we were maybe going to go get a drink. And I said, oh, actually, I have to go do a workshop myself. I'm teaching a workshop online. And I remember her just referring to me, and she goes, wow, you don't miss a beat. You don't celebrate. And it, I I can really recognize this sometimes in me. There's this sort of a runaway ambition. And the interesting thing with ambition is that typically in this world that we live in, ambition is lauded, ambition is celebrated. It's rare that we say to someone, you shouldn't be so ambitious. Um, at least, you know, people generally kind of encourage us to be this way. But I think for me, on occasion, that can drift into like an addiction to proving that I have a worth, right? And this is very much connected to family of origin, early infancy, Roman Catholic cultural programming. This idea that I just by being isn't enough. I have to prove my worth through my output. I remember this specifically when I did a glut of writing. I remember releasing 2 books in 2 years, and just having this sense of that was maybe too much, especially because I wanted to go on and write a third book. And I think it was only that for my publisher sort of not really aligning with the idea that stopped. Otherwise, I could have imagined that I would have been on this, say, a treadmill of writing a book a year. That to me feels a little bit too much. But this is all part of my programming where I'm not always convinced of my worth. So I amplify my output. I do more. I remember it was also a challenge when I first started this Patreon where I just wasn't sure if I was doing enough. And then I've kind of like enjoyed this Patreon because there's moments when I can experiment with doing less and then doing more and then just seeing what happens. And typically what I notice is when I do less, um, the whole thing doesn't collapse. It continues. So there's good faith in the group, it seems. Um, so another kind of element of the ambition thing is that we achieve great things. They look like great things, but internally they don't land as enough, right? This is something that I have often sort of struggled with where I would do something, it would feel remarkable. Other people would say that was remarkable. but I would still be left with a bit of an empty feeling inside. And I think the trick with this is really just to um acknowledge your wins as much as possible. I have a little thing that I do, which is really fun to do. And at the end of every month, at the end of every 3 months, maybe twice a year, depending on how often I remember, I'll write down all the things that I've done. And if you're listening to this now, I think this is just a great way of getting a sense, especially if you have a lot of programming around worth. This is a great way to get a sense of your worth. Like, write down all the things you've done this year. And for me, when I'm writing this down, it'll also be I set a boundary with this person. I had a fight with this person and didn't walk away from it. I actually went and supported myself. So I will kind of look on my achievements in terms of just development. Um, and another thing that I notice in me, which is definitely a sign of some wounding, is my independence. I can be so independent in life. I do things completely on my own. I need to I mean, these things aren't so relevant now because we can use AI for a lot of this. But I remember back in the day, like learning how to program to make websites, or trying to do all these things in different languages when I didn't speak the language, when I could have just asked someone, hey, would you come along and translate for me? Things like this. Or um yeah, and quite often, even with say some of the work that I do here, some of the courses and programs, I could probably benefit from an assistant. But because of this deep wound that I must be independent, I don't do that. There's a kind of a, a baked in self resilience in me, which I've always thought was a strength. But ultimately, as I get a little older and as I become more vulnerable, and I just be- it's this is all my independence is a mask for just not trusting, right? I have a lot of difficulty in trusting that if I ask for something, it'll actually come about. And I know this all just comes from my family. I mean, I had many, many years of my dad in particular just letting me down, just, forgetting to pick me up, promising to do things and not doing it. And then kind of this just became kind of accepted. I never asked my mother for anything because I just saw that she was stressed and overworked and I didn't want to be a bother, right? You see that there, how the not wanting to be a bother feeds into the hyper independence. Um, this is also kind of like leaked into many of my relationships where I've chosen partners who needed me more than I would ever need them. So I wouldn't have to step into that terribly vulnerable place of needing a partner. I remember once I broke my leg, I broke my ankle, and at the time, I was living up 4 flights of stairs and I could come down them. I could with crutches and I could go shopping. But I realized I wasn't able to walk with crutches and carry a shopping bag. It's like phenomenally difficult. I have so much respect for people who navigate crutches, the actual physical strength it requires. But I just remember these moments of being at home and feeling like I would almost rather starve than ask if someone could do a shopping for me. And then eventually, like a friend offered to do a shopping, and I said, how much do you want to charge me for that? These sort of ridiculous things. Like, the beauty of friendship is that we don't have to, is that we can um, step out of transactions. You can just receive. But when you have this wounding of hyper independence, of is self-resilience, it can prevent you from doing that. So I think how I kind of work with that is I just ask. I try when I can to ask. And it might be something like, hey, can I stay with you? Or hey, can you show me that? Or would you mind helping me with this? And what I notice is that whenever I do ask, it typically gives a friend, the opportunity to get closer to me. Another thing that I kind of noticed, um, that I have, that might be sort of, which is sort of again a symptom of hidden wounding, is over functioning, right? So it's becoming the responsible one. And I tend to be in groups, or way less now because I have cut myself off from a lot of people. But I tend to notice that this sense of, in my family, I was responsible for everybody else's emotional state. That was kind of my role when I came into my family. I would be the peacemaker. I would try and fix my sister. I would pick up the broken pieces of furniture in the living room, things like this. I was the responsible one. And I think I began to understand. I think because this is what we do as children. We emerge into houses, we arrive into houses and environments, and we, based on what we're shown, based on the love we're given, we kind of ascertain, okay, this is my role. This is what I've got to do. And so for me, the role that I understood from a very young age was I must manage everybody else's feelings. So I have always felt very comfortable in that role. I've often had bosses who were unhinged. I've worked for like crazy people over and over and over again because I could manage them. I knew what to do. I was very comfortable. I've always been very comfortable in the presence of incredibly emotionally immature people, um, the narcissists, the sociopaths, and so on. I know what to do with them. I know how to calm them, and so as a result, recognizing, this was my role in life from a young age. I think I sought them out, or at least we were energetically drawn, so that I would find myself working for very unhinged people and being very stressed out, but thinking, this is my role in life. This is what I'm here to do. In the same way that dogs maybe decide they're here to protect their owners whenever there's a car on the street or something like that. That was my thing. So this kind of wounding, that I've noticed in me, how I work on it, in many ways, especially with the ambition thing, the way that I work on that is just to really, really look at how much I've done, and not just sort of assume that I'm going to naturally remember how much I've done. I actively write it down, because if I'm not writing it down, I will forget what I've done, and I won't celebrate myself. I'll go straight from one thing to the next as though I haven't done anything all year. And this just means that I never get to integrate, I never get to rest, I never get that moment of, well, that'll do, pig. You know what I mean? From Babe movie. Um, if I hope that reference makes sense, or else it's going to sound very, very weird if you haven't seen Babe, the movie. But this idea, so I try and write that down to to actively, really actively try and integrate and protect my worth. And then with the independence thing, I I just ask people. I try and take up space. I'm in groups where occasionally, I think, oh, I won't talk, and then I go, no, 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 I'm going to talk here. I'm gonna speak up, and I'm gonna like ask the help of the group. Um, I what also helps me there is I often do things that I'm really not very good at. So for example, I often go to dance classes, and I'm not very good at dance. I for some reason I don't dance in the sense of like following movements that I'm not very good at. I just tend to forget or zone out. So doing things like that requires me to be quite vulnerable and look for help. Um, Otherwise, this pattern of self resilience would mean that I would never do anything that I wasn't fully confident I could do on my own. So I try to do these things. I also I live in different countries and live with different languages. And that always, I've noticed, puts me in a place where I'm a little bit dependent on the help of others. And then the other thing, the responsibility thing. Um, the way I manage that in many ways, or the way that I have managed that, is just to become really aware of the transaction in my friendships. Where am I, because this is like, water always seeks the path of least resistance, right? And if you have in the sort of person who chases validation, or has the belief that the way that you belong are being responsible for everyone else, then you will naturally just keep gravitating towards people and relationships and situations where you are required. The price for you being there is that you must be responsible for others. And so, what I try and do, and I'll tell you, this can be sometimes nerve wracking, is I try and just gravitate towards people who don't need me, and developing friendships where I have to like make the first move, where I have to reach out rather than knowing, oh, this person needs me so much, they're always going to reach out. So for me, it's often terrifying to have a friend who doesn't really need me, doesn't need taken care of, functions well on their own, because then this throws into doubt a survival system that I've had since the beginning that, like, I am needed, my responsibility is required here, therefore I can survive. So that's something that I do, um, and I'm increasingly do, is try and find out people and spend time with people who don't necessarily need me. They just like me. So that's really all I wanted to talk about here. It's something that I've been reflecting on. Also, sort of in the summer, I'm here in Mallorca. It's like painfully hot sometimes. And I was having a difficulty resting. I was having a difficulty just going, hey, it's too hot to work. You could just go to a beach or something like that. And I was having difficulty and I noticed, there's this is a good opportunity to just explore some of the more subtle wounding that I carry and maybe just explain it to you so it's useful. So that's all I wanted to say. I hope some of that was of help and talk to you all soon. Love you loads. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.